Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
You're listening to the sweet, sensual, and serendipitous sounds of Nerdery and Murdery.
Zig, damn it. Welcome to episode 106 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 106. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and the nerd and the murd. And Zig, I will let you take over with the nerdery side of the house.
Awesome. Today we're doing another Star Wars episode for 106. Oh, while I'm at it, I also want to point out 106. This is the beginning of our third year.
Awesome.
Yeah, third year.
Wow.
Yeah. Building our audience. Yay.
And I'm a terrible Star Wars fan. I have not watched The Bad Batch.
I've only watched a little bit of it. It is on in the background right now. So for this episode, I may look over to admire the beauty of it.
I've heard it's really good. I've heard. As a listener of Two Geeks and a Microphone, they've gone over The Bad Batch, and it sounds really, really interesting. I've just never sat down to watch it.
Yeah, I want to say Two Geeks are doing an episode by episode play-by on it.
They're not doing it for season 2. They did half the season. They did the first couple of episodes, and then they're doing half the season. Then they'll do the season as a whole.
Okay. Well, in keeping with our Star Wars chronology, I wanted to do the Bad Batch next because the first episode takes place during Order 66, and in my mind, that places it before or kind of in the middle of Attack or Revenge of the Sith. So
Right.
the next episode we do on Star Wars will be Revengeance. But I want to get into Bad Batch as well. We may revisit this too, since they're only in the second season.
Yeah.
Later on. But yeah, Star Wars: The Bad Batch is an American animated series created by Dave Filoni for the streaming service Disney Plus. It is part of the Star Wars franchise, acting as both a sequel to and a spinoff from the series Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The Bad Batch is produced by Lucasfilm Animation, with Jennifer Corbett as head writer and Brad Rau as supervising director. D. Bradley Baker voices the members of the Bad Batch, a squad of elite clone troopers with genetic mutations. He also voices other clones in the series, reprising his role from the Clone Wars. Michelle Ang stars as Omega, a female clone who joins the squad. The series was officially ordered by Disney Plus in July 2020 as a spinoff from the Clone Wars, with Filoni, Corbett, and Rau attached. The first season of Star Wars: The Bad Batch premiered on May 4th, 2021, and ran for 16 episodes until August 13th. It received positive reviews from critics, and a second season, also consisting of 16 episodes, premiered on January 4th, 2023, and will conclude on March 29th. So I have to say this about The Bad Batch along with the Clone Wars. It is computer-generated animation, which I like. But a lot of the things you see in Clone Wars and eventually Rebels, and Order 66 and Ahsoka and other things like that, all sort of culminate inside of this series. It is almost a bridging series, and it is very action packed. There's a lot of action going on in this. A lot of space fights, a lot of ground assaults, things of that nature. It's quite brilliant, and you get to see how these people went from a republic where everybody was basically free to do what they want as long as they didn't hurt anybody, to an authoritarian regime. And it tracks that progress, at least in the first season. On production, by September of 2016, Star Wars: The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels supervisor director Dave Filoni had stepped back from that position in the latter series so he could focus more on the series writing, as well as the development of future animated series for Lucasfilms. By July 2018, Filoni announced that the final season of The Clone Wars would be released to the streaming service Disney Plus. The season included a 4-episode arc introducing a squad of clone troopers with genetic mutations known as the Bad Batch. So they're basically a group of specially mutated clones set up as a special, basically like a special forces group. That is why they get the moniker the Bad Batch, because they're not like the other clones. They look different, they sound different, they react differently. The episodes previously existed as a story reels on earlier unfinished season of the series, and came directly from the plans of Star Wars creator George Lucas. Disney Plus officially ordered a new series from Lucasfilm Animation in July 2020 titled Star Wars: The Bad Batch, spinoff from the final series Clone Wars, following these clone troopers. And it's supposed to take place in the aftermath of the Clone Wars. So how we go from an army of clones to an army of stormtroopers who are, in some cases, conscripted, and in other cases where they just join up. The announcement described the series as Dave Filoni's vision, and he served as executive producer alongside Lucasfilm's Anthena Portillo, and supervising director Brad Rau and head writer Jennifer Corbett, with Lucasfilm's Carrie Beck and Josh Rhimes as co-executive producers. Filoni described the series as very much in the vein of the Clone Wars, and said it would stay true to Lucas's vision of that series of telling epic, exciting adventure stories. And in August of 2021, before the release of the 2-part series finale, the series was officially renewed for a second season. The first trailer of the series, which released in December of 2020, confirmed that D. Bradley Baker would return from the Clone Wars as the voice of the clone troopers in the series, including the members of the Bad Batch and Captain Rex. So Captain Rex actually figures pretty prominently in the Bad Batch as well. It's also revealed that a younger version of the character, Fennec Shand from The Mandalorian, would be appearing in the series. And Ming-Na Wen soon confirmed that she will reprise her role as Shand. Additionally, Stephen Stanton and Andrew Kishna reprise their roles as Admiral Tarkin and Saul Guerrero, respectively. Kevin Kline was confirmed to be scoring the series from January 2021 after previously scoring The Clone Wars and Rebels. He wrote the Bad Batch theme for the final season of The Clone Wars and described the score for the Bad Batch as evolution from its predecessor with a mix of electronics and orchestrated elements. Kinner was inspired by the soundtrack to The Guns of Navarone and The Dirty Dozen. And you get that in the music. There is a feel to old 1960s World War II films, like The Dirty Dozen, The Guns of Navarone. It has that feeling to it, as well as also having the Star Wars feeling, which is weird, but it works. Kinner's score was the first season was released digitally by Walt Disney Records in 2 volumes, so you can actually go out and buy the score. It's pretty good. If you're into the music, it probably wouldn't hurt to take a look at it. So I want to talk about the first episode to kind of set the series up. At the tail end of the Clone Wars, the Bad Batch defective clones Hunter, Tech, Crosshairs, and Wrecker, plus cyborg clone Echo, are assisting Jedi Master Deepa Billaba and her Padawan Caleb Doom. Caleb Doom is the character in Rebels. This is happening on Kaler, and Order 66 is issued, and Billaba is killed by her clones. The Bad Batch receive the order too, but only Crosshairs feels compelled to obey it. And Hunter lets Doom escape, returning to Kamino. The Bad Batch learns that the war is over, that an empire has replaced the Republic, and they meet a young girl, Omega, who is another defective clone. Admiral Tarkin arrives to evaluate the clone's viability and sends the Bad Batch to eliminate a group of insurgents on Onderon. When they discover that these insurgents are harmless refugees under Saul Guerrero, who refuses to submit to the new empire. Hunter and his men abandon the mission and return for Omega. They are arrested for treason, and Tarkin has Crosshair's inhibitor chip enhanced, turning him against his squad mates and forcing the Bad Batch and Omega to flee without him. And that's kind of how the series sets up. That's why I wanted to do it before, we talk about Revenge of the Sith. Again, it is purely, in my mind, chronologically correct. I'm sure there are people who would argue against me that it should have been Revenge of the Sith first and then this, but in my mind, they kind of take place at the same time. And the story of the Bad Batch makes more sense if you put it before Revenge of the Sith. The Bad Batch, formerly known as Clone Force 99 and designated as Experimental Unit Clone Force 99, that's hard to say, was a Clone Command Special Forces squad that was active during the Clone Wars. The squad initially consisted of 4 clone commandos that were designed with genetic mutations, led by Clone Sergeant Hunter, a clone with enhanced sensory abilities. Other members of the squad include CT-9904 Crosshair, a clone with keen eyesight marksmanship that allowed him to excel in long-distance firefights. Wrecker, a reckless clone with an enhanced muscular form, and Tech, a clone with an enhanced mental capacity and intelligence. Following the crucial battle of Anaxes, Advanced Recon Commando Clone Corporal CT-1409 Echo joined the unit because of the cybernetic enhancements. He's set up as a cyborg, kind of like Lobot was in Empire Strikes Back. So he's a very similar type of set up. He's got the piece that goes around the back of his head, which allows him to connect to computers. Most of the members' mutations and the ordeal Echo suffered prior to joining their caused their inhibitor chips to have less effect or to fail entirely, meaning that Clone Force 99 was able to disobey Order 66, at least at first while they were fighting the conquest of Kaler. And Hunter helped Jedi Padawan Caleb Doom escape the other clones by lying about his death. However, unlike the rest of the team, Crosshair was affected by his chip, attempting to kill Doom during the incident. In the aftermath, as the Galactic Republic became the Galactic Empire, the Bad Batch's loyalty was questioned by Admiral Wilhuff Tarkin, and I had no idea Grand Moff Tarkin's first name was Wilhuff. He sent them on a mission to eliminate a group of insurgents, but the squad figured out that they were basically on a extermination run. Of course, they picked up the Omega, a young experimental female clone they met on Kamino. They are fugitives from the Empire, and they eventually come to work as mercenaries for the information broker Ciderin Scaleback in the early Imperial era. Clone Force 99 was named in remembrance of 99, a malformed maintenance duty clone who died while aiding the defense of Kamino from the Separatist invasion during the Clone Wars. The unit originated as a batch of clones who were created with desirable genetic mutations that made them superior soldiers. As a result of genetic manipulation, these mutations also had the unique effect of altering their appearance and voices greatly from regular clone troopers. Each one of the members acquired certain abilities unique to the team. While a part of the Grand Army of the Republic, they earned quite the reputation. They were known to have a 100% success rate. The squad worked together with Marshal Command CC 2224, or Cody, on certain occasions, but did not report to anyone in particular. The group somewhat disdainfully referred to normal troopers as regs. According to Wrecker, whatever ship they used was always shot down and destroyed when working alongside regular clones. As a Republic force needed reinforcements on Kaler, and most available forces were sent to the capital due to the Battle of Coruscant, Clone Force 99 was sent to provide support. There they met Jedi Padawan Commander Caleb Doom, who saw them as reinforcements. Together they assisted Doom's master, Jedi General Deepa Bilaba, and their battalion to finish off the battle droids and their AATs. Just as the Bad Batch advanced, Darth Sidious issued Order 66, resulting in all clone troops turning against their Jedi generals in Padawan. After taking part in the conquest of Kaler, the Bad Batch arrived on Kamino, where they watched a hologram of Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine's proclamation of the Galactic Empire, and that's where they met the child named Omega. They didn't really get with Saw Gerrera's partisans as much as they didn't want to kill innocent civilians. So they're not really working with the rebels per se at the beginning, although as the series progresses, they become more and more aligned with the rebels because of what's going on with the Empire. Again, it shows that transition from a free and fair republic to despotism, which is basically what the Sheev Palpatine was going for. Darth Sidious wanted to turn the Republic into a dictatorship, an empire. Whereas a lot of the people who are originally caught up in this idea just wanted order. They wanted a return to normalcy, which kind of mirrors some of the things that are going on in our world today. And I think that was kind of the idea of Star Wars Together, because how do you go from this republic, where everybody's basically able to do whatever the hell they want, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, to this imperial dictatorship where if you speak out against the empire, even complaining about levied taxes, you can be taken in and arrested for that. Bad Batch shows that progression of how you go from point A to point Z, as it were. It's pretty dark, but at the same time, it's also really, really good. It's really, really well drawn, or I guess generated, computer generated. The backgrounds are nice. And Dave Filoni has really done his homework. I love that Dave Filoni is also working pretty closely with Jon Favreau on Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett. I'm not sure who's in charge of Ahsoka, but it appears the new Ahsoka series is Heir to the Empire. Somebody finally sat down and
Looks like it's going to be based off it. Yes.
yeah, that somebody finally went, you know what? We made Heir to the Empire non-canon, and that was a mistake, so we're going to retcon that. And it seems to be that's what they're doing with things like Rebels and the Bad Batch and Ahsoka, the Book of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, all of that. It's kind of brilliant. It's kind of wonderful. I'm really, really enjoying this new take on it because it gives us back that Heir to the Empire feel, which is where we all thought it was going in the 1990s. You know, when they announced that they were going to be doing new Star Wars movies, we assumed we were going to get Heir to the Empire. That was our assumption. You know, in 1994, 1995. And then we got the prequels, which was fine. But then when they talked about, hey, we're finally going to get some sequels out after Disney bought it out, we assumed it was going to be the story of Heir to the Empire. It was not.
And it should have been.
I agree. It should have been. I didn't dislike what we got. I mean, I know a lot of people were really unhappy with it.
I'm included in that.
Yeah. Yes. You included. But I think Star Wars does best when it gets away from the Skywalker saga. I'm going to be honest. I think we need to get away from the Skywalker saga. I think we need to explore more of the universe. And I love that that's what we're doing with Mandalorian. I love that that's what we're doing with, maybe a little less with Ahsoka. It's more Heir to the Empire with the Skywalkers in it. I love all this. I'm so happy. I would like to take a time machine and go back to 10-year-old me when he found out that Return of the Jedi was the last of the Star Wars and tell him, dude, we got so much more now. It's on TV like all the time. But that is basically it for the Bad Batch. It's a brilliant series. I need to get a little deeper into it. I'm basically into the first season. I haven't gotten to the second season yet.
Yeah, I need to watch it myself. I really do.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. And if you like the Clone Wars, I mean, it's just a continuation. I always thought that the first part of the Clone Wars was a little goofy. It was a little too mired in some of the ideas of the prequels. And as it advanced, it got better. Because originally the idea was, we didn't talk about the actual Clone Wars. We need to actually show that. But yeah, the Bad Batch kind of plays on that. A lot in the way that the Rebels did, which I loved Rebels as well. But yeah, this is a pretty good series. If you're not watching it and you're a Star Wars fan, you should check it out. If you're not watching it and you're not a Star Wars fan, you should still check it out because it's an interesting series.
Awesome. Well, appreciate that. And between, listening to you and listening to Two Geeks on a Microphone talk about it, like I said, I know this is a series I really need to get into, and I just haven't. Yeah. And I need to put it on my list and just get into it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you're watching Mando, you're going to love it. If you love Mando, you're going to love the Bad Batch.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that journey. With that, we will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
Today I got my information off Medium and Wikipedia, and this is the story of Earle Nelson.
Earle Nelson.
So Earle Nelson was born Earle Leonard Farrell on May 12, 1897 in San Francisco, California. His mother and father died of syphilis when he was still a toddler, and he went to live with his maternal grandmother, a devout Pentecostal with 2 children of her own.
Oh my God. Syphilis is awful.
Mm-hmm. And to die from it, too.
Yeah. Well, it makes you crazy beforehand.
Uh-huh.
That must not have been a good household to grow up in.
Well, in his early years, Nelson already exhibited the signs of self-loathing and a penchant for morbid curiosities. By the age of 7, he had already been expelled from primary school for violent behavior. And somewhere around his 10th birthday, he had a collision with a streetcar that left him unconscious for almost a week.
Oh no.
When he finally awoke, he continued to suffer from headaches, memory loss, and exhibited erratic behavior such as talking to people who weren't there, manically quoting the Bible, and sneaking in to watch female members of his family undress.
Head trauma.
Yep.
Okay.
His grandmother said he would often leave for school properly dressed only to return in shredded, unkept clothes, and he was obsessed with the Book of Revelation. By his early teens, he was already frequenting brothels and bars along the Barbary Coast red light district in San Francisco, and at some point during this time, he contracted a venereal disease. By his 18th birthday, Nelson was already looking at a 2-year stint in San Quentin State Prison for breaking into a cabin in a remote area of Plumas County. He claimed that he had believed it was abandoned, and he began his stay in 1915, but was paroled early on September 6, 1916. By March 9, 1917, he had been arrested again, this time for petty larceny. He was jailed for 6 months and then discharged, only to be arrested soon after for a Los Angeles burglary, and he spent about 5 months in jail but escaped. Nelson attempted to put his criminal past behind him by joining the military, but he deserted after only 6 weeks. He would continue this cycle of enlisting and then deserting several more times using different aliases and joining different branches of the service. In 1918, he was sent to the Napa State Mental Hospital by the U.S. Navy after he was observed behaving erratically while in service to them. The Navy psychologist recorded Nelson as living in a continual psychotic state. The psychologist at the mental hospital noted that Nelson showed no indications that he was violent, homicidal, or destructive during a visit on May 21, 1918. Despite this initial assessment, he noted that Nelson had gone on to reveal many hallucinations and paranoid delusions to him. Nelson claimed he was seeing faces and hearing music that did not exist, and he also believed that he was being poisoned. He claimed to hear voices that were whispering for him to commit suicide, and Nelson told another psychiatrist that he would find a sharp object and cut his wrists if he were jailed again. During his therapy sessions, Nelson experienced headaches radiating up the back of his neck, fainted several times, and often felt dizzy. Nelson was given the nickname Houdini after escaping several times, and after bringing him back each time, they finally gave up on retrieving him the last time he disappeared. The Navy discharged him on May 17, 1919, and the hospital formally closed his file, saying that he had improved. Using the name Evan Lewis Fuller, Nelson procured work as a janitor at St. Mary's Hospital, and it was there he met Mary Martin, who was 60 years old, almost 4 decades older than him. They married in August 1919, but it did not last. Mary found him prone to jealousy, rage, delusion, religious zealotry, and bizarre sexual preferences, and his increasingly violent behavior towards her led her to separate from him after only 6 months. On May 19, 1921, Nelson entered a home on Pacific Avenue in San Francisco under the guise of being a plumber. Once inside, he attempted to molest a 12-year-old girl, but was chased out of the home by her brother after she screamed for help. Nelson fled, but was tracked down and detained for hours as he rode the trolley. The subsequent competency hearing resulted in him being deemed dangerous and sent back to Napa State Mental Hospital, where he would escape 2 more times before being discharged in 1925. On February 20th, 1926, Nelson claimed his first victim. He entered the boarding house run by wealthy 60-year-old Clara Newman by posing as a potential tenant named Roger Wilson. Once they were alone, he strangled her and raped her post-mortem before hiding her corpse in a vacant apartment in the house.
Oof.
On March 2nd, 1926, Nelson entered the home of Laura Beale in nearby San Jose and strangled her with a silken cord. Investigators said that the cord was wound so tightly around her neck that it was embedded into her flesh. On June 26, 1926, Nelson strangled and raped 63-year-old Lillian St. Mary in San Francisco. And 2 weeks later, he would go on to murder 53-year-old Ollie Russell with a cord in her boarding house, once again raping his victim post-mortem. At this point, police were catching on that the similarities in the case meant this series of murders were the work of one man, and Nelson was no doubt aware of this, as he waited until August 16, 1926 before murdering and then raping 52-year-old Mary Nisbet, an apartment building proprietor in Oakland. Her body was discovered by her husband, who was questioned by police as a possible suspect until witnesses provided statements they had seen a smiling stranger lurking outside of Nisbet's apartment building on the day of her murder. The man they claimed to have seen was described as a dark man with a stocky build. They said he had long arms and large hands. This is when local newspapers began calling him the Dark Strangler, Gorilla Man, and the Gorilla Killer. With the heat turned up on him in the San Francisco area, Nelson decided it was time to make a move.
Is Nelson a big guy?
Yes, Nelson was a big guy.
Okay.
On October 19, 1926, he resurfaced in Portland, Oregon, where he murdered and raped 35-year-old landlady Beatty Withers. Her son found her body in the attic, stuffed into a large trunk covered with clothes. The following day, 59-year-old Virginia Grant was murdered at a vacant house she owned. Her body was hidden away behind the home's basement furnace. The day after that, landlady Mabel Fluke vanished. Her body was found several days later in the attic, strangled with a scarf. And after this 3-day murder spree, Nelson returned to San Francisco, where he murdered and raped 56-year-old widow Anna Edmonds on November 19, 1926. A witness described seeing a man at the Edmonds home discussing the sale of her house on the day she had been murdered, and her description matched that of the man they had been calling the Dark Strangler. The following day, a 28-year-old pregnant woman was attacked by a man posing as a potential buyer. She survived the attack and was able to give the police a description of the man. She said he was about 5 inches tall, well-dressed, and well-spoken. And she told reporters that she had seen him as non-threatening initially, but in retrospect, she realized he had been commenting on odd details like the ceiling in an effort to get her to look upwards so he could catch her off guard and attack her. On November 29, 1926, Nelson murdered and raped Blanche Myers in her Portland home. Police were able to lift fingerprints from Myers' bedpost, giving them one more clue to move their case forward. By this time, Portland newspapers had reported on the murders and their similarities, igniting a frenzy of phone calls and reports of a suspicious stranger. One woman claimed that a man had stayed at her boarding house over the Thanksgiving holiday using the name Adrian Harris. She said on the day Myers was murdered, the man had told her he was leaving to catch a train to Vancouver, Washington, and wouldn't be back. It sent up red flags since he had paid for many more days in advance and made no request for a refund. She showed police jewelry he had given her and another female boarder as a gift, and police confirmed that the items belonged to Florence Monks, one of his earlier Seattle victims. Police in both Portland and San Francisco issued a public safety warning to their citizens. Elderly women were cautioned against inviting strangers into their homes for any reason, even offering to have an officer come out to accompany them if they needed to show a room for rent and had no one else to accompany them. Meanwhile, Nelson had moved on to the Midwest and East Coast, hitchhiking and stowing away on trains. On December 23, 1926, the body of 41-year-old Elmira Berard was found inside her Council Bluffs, Iowa home. She had been strangled with a shirt. At first, her death was thought to be a suicide because she had recently been released from a psychiatric hospital, but then they began investigating it as a murder once they realized she had also been raped after her death. On December 27, 1926, 23-year-old Bonnie Pace was strangled and raped in her Kansas City, Missouri home, and she was discovered in an upstairs bedroom by her husband. On December 28th, Nelson strangled 28-year-old Germania Harpin and her infant son Robert. Germania had been raped after her death, and Robert had been strangled with his own diaper. Germania's husband found them when he had returned to work that evening, and this is the only known incident in which Nelson murdered a male victim or a young child. Moving still further east, Nelson murdered and raped 53-year-old landlady Mary McConnell in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on April 27, 1927. Several pieces of jewelry were stolen from her residence, one of which Nelson tried to sell unsuccessfully at a pawn shop the following day. On May 27, 1927, Nelson rented a room in Buffalo, New York from 53-year-old Jenny Randolph using the alias Charles Harrison. Randolph was found 3 days later. She had been strangled and raped and then stuffed under a bed in her home. Her brother, Gideon Gillett, was able to describe to police, saying that she had met him when he first arrived at the house. He said he was of stocky build, dark complected, and had dark slicked back straight hair. Another boarder in the house would later identify Nelson as the man he had introduced to as Charles Harrison at the Randolph home. On June 1st, 1927, Fannie Mae and her boarder, Maureen Attorthy, were discovered in the Detroit, Michigan boarding house that May managed. Their bodies were discovered by the house owner when he came by to collect rent funds. Both women had been garroted with a cord cut off from a table lamp, and because this had been done while the lamp was still on, police knew that the knife used would show both black markings from the electricity and nicks in the blade. On June 3, 1927, Nelson murdered 27-year-old Mary Cecilia Satisma in Chicago, Illinois. Similar to the previous murder, she had been strangled with an appliance cord, and several items of menswear had been taken from the home. On June 8, 1927, Nelson moved north to Canada, where 14-year-old Lola Cowan was discovered missing while selling flowers door-to-door in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Police were still looking for Cowan when Emily Patterson went missing on June 10th. Patterson was later found that evening by her husband, and she had been strangled, bludgeoned with a claw hammer, and raped before being stuffed under her son's bed. Her husband found her there when he knelt by the bed to say his evening prayers. Several items were missing from the home, including a whipcord suit, the victim's gold wedding band, the family Bible, and 7 $10 bills. The knife used with May and Atworthy murders were also found. The ring taken from the Patterson home was found to have been sold to a local jeweler, and the suits were found at a secondhand store. The owners of each store were able to identify Nelson as the man who had sold them. Nelson had also gotten a shave, haircut, and massage at a barber shop next door to the secondhand store on June 10th, according to the barber there, who also indicated he had found dried blood and scratch marks on the man's scalp. The barber said he asked about them, which caused the customer to become agitated and demand that he not touch them. Following Nelson's trail of carnage, police investigated the home of August Hill, where Nelson had recently stayed, and searching the room he had rented there, police discovered the nude and mutilated body of Cowan under the bed. Her clothing and possessions were absent. The bed he had been slept in, presumably while the corpse lay underneath the bed.
Ugh.
The Winnipeg City Council posted a $1,500 reward for any information leading to Nelson's capture. Canadian police sent descriptions of Nelson to the United States in case Nelson had fled back across the border, and sightings of Nelson began reported from Regina, Saskatchewan, and Boissevain, Manitoba. On June 16, 1927, a man going by the name of Virgil Wilson, who fit the description of Nelson, was arrested in Killarney near Manitoba.
He's working his way back west.
Yep. They were doubtful that they had the right man because he seemed so calm and collected, cooperating with them fully. They placed him in a local jail, but he managed to escape the very same evening. However, he attempted to catch a train that was transporting some members of the Winnipeg police force. This mistake would cost him his freedom, landing him back behind bars within 12 hours of his escape after being arrested by an officer with the Crystal City Police Department about 40 miles east of Wacopa. From there, he was transported to a station in Winnipeg where he was photographed, fingerprinted, measured, and prepared for a lineup, and thousands of spectators gathered outside to catch a glimpse of him. The photographs taken by the station were sent to police in the United States, resulting in further identifications being made by multiple witnesses. His fingerprints matched those left behind at several crime scenes. Molds of his teeth matched tooth imprints left on some of the victims. When asked about his crime by reporters, Nelson flippantly replied, "I only do my lady killings on Saturday nights." However, he would later claim he was innocent on all charges and the people who identified him were all wrong. Police were unable to coax a confession to even a single crime from him, and he was taken to a trial in Winnipeg for his crimes there. His ex-wife, Mary, testified to the court that he was completely insane. 60 other individuals from both Canada and the United States testified at his trial. One witness, a jail guard who guarded Nelson during his incarceration, testified that Nelson was observed with a particular passage from the Bible, Proverbs 23:26-28. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes keep to my ways. For a prostitute is a deep pit and a wayward wife a narrow well. Like a bandit, she lies in wait and multiples the unfaithful among men. Nelson's trial came to a close on November 5th, 1927. It took only 40 minutes for a jury to sentence him to death, and members of two of his final victims' families visited him in prison in search of answers, but he continued to proclaim his innocence to them. Nelson's lawyer petitioned for clemency on the grounds of insanity, saying that his client's personal history had been misinterpreted to the jury via the press during the trial. More than 20 affidavits were presented to substantiate the claim of mental incapacity, but in the end, the appeal was denied and Nelson was scheduled for execution. On January 13, 1928, at 7:30 a.m., just under 2 years from the date of his first murder, Earle Nelson was hanged at the Vaughan Street in Winnipeg. His final words were, "I forgive all those who wronged me." Nelson was the first serial killer in American history who was so widely covered by the press as such. The numbers of murders he completed, at least 22 confirmed, would remain a record for nearly 50 years until the Juan Corona crimes in 1971. Nelson is also considered the first serial sex murderer in America during the 20th century, and his crimes were the source of the inspiration for Alfred Hitchcock's 1943 film, The Shadow of Doubt. And that is the story of Earle Nelson.
Earle Nelson.
Thank you for taking that journey with me.
Well, thank you for taking us on that journey. It seems like they could have nipped this in the bud when this guy was in the mental institution the first time.
Yeah, you think so, but mental health was not what it was. It's not even that great today. But back then was just pretty horrific.
Yeah.
So, well, that takes us to the end of another recording week. As always, you can find our information on nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our website, our hub for everything, where you can find links to this information, pictures to the items we talked about. You can also find links to our YouTube page.
Yes, our YouTube page, where we have a YouTube playlist for every single nerdery episode we've got, showing links and ads and examples of what we're talking about, awesome. As well as numerous TikToks and things that we think are funny.
Awesome. Appreciate all your work on that. You can also find the link to our merchandise, where if you wish to find show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing merchandise there. That goes to help the show. What also goes to help the show is our Patreon, where our patrons donate to the show, help keep us going. There are costs associated with the show, so we appreciate each and every one of our patrons.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for us. So with that,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.